Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis and joined today by Ben Mintz. And, before we get started talking about the halfway point and all the football stuff, you're kind of doing something with Brickwatch and the Grove Collective. Explain that a little bit.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the podcast. I appreciate it. So basically what's going on is Dave Portnoy, my boss at Barstool Sports, and he owns Brickwatch Company where, I was the world's most esteemed watch salesman for a couple months there this summer. So basically I had this idea because I have a great relationship with the Grove Collective NIL run by Walker Jones at Ole Miss, and I'm close with them. And I was representing Brickwatch with Dave, and I know Dave has some Brickwatches to move. So I had this whole idea, like, why don't we do a Brickwatch Grove Collective partnership? And I pitched it to Dave, and he was all about it. And so these watches are really nice watches. You go to brickwatchcompany.com. They're $2,000 watches. Well, what we're doing is 1,000 goes to the Grove Collective, and the rest goes back to Brickwatch. And they're actually $1,919. So it's a little less than $2,000. And I actually just got off the phone with Dave. We got some breaking news here. I got off the phone with Dave. We had a good day of sales yesterday. And I told Dave, I was like, look, I think a reasonable goal here, because these are almost $2,000 watches. I was like, if we sell 50 watches, is that enough for you to promise the Barstool College Football Show and you to come to the Grove next year and do an Oxford weekend? And he said, yes. So we have a tangible goal. We got to sell 50 of these things. I believe we're in double digits right now. It's not an easy sell. I'm not going to sit here and say it is. $1,919 a lot of money. And anybody that is thinking about it, DM me on my Twitter at Stool Mintzy or my Instagram at Stool Mintzy. I will personally give you a phone call, introduce myself, whether I know you or not, because this is a by any means necessary situation. We all need Dave Big Cat, and we need Brandon Walker to have to come to the Grove and face the music. This is something that needs to happen in life. And so whatever I got to do to take this to the streets to sell these 50 damn watches, I'm going to do. And I think we got momentum. I've got a bunch of leads today. I'm hoping to be at 15 to 20 by the end of the day. I know if we get to 40 or 45, we'll get like big closing momentum at the end. So I think, it's not an easy thing. I mean, like I said, they're $1,919 watches. It's a big commitment, but 1,000 does go to the Grove Collective, and the watches are badass. So I think it can be done. It's going to take some work, but I'm here to do it.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. And getting Brandon Walker into the Grove there could be some fun in that.
Yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. He's got to face the music. And just there's no better look. The Barstool College Football Show, I don't know if people followed it, but I mean, it gets crowds like game day or bigger with Dave and Big Cat and Casey Smith and Walker and Big Ev. There's no better setting for it than the Grove. I mean, it would be full circle. I mean, for selfish reasons, it would be full circle for me. And I think we all want it. Ole Miss fans have been awesome supporting me and Dave and everything about Barstool. And, like I said, I feel weird. It's always weird asking people for money, but, I feel like a lot of the people that support the Grove Collective that are higher end boosters, this makes sense. And look, it gives them something sweet for, if they're already donating money anyway, at least you got something cool to show for it. And I know that Tyler Jordan and Real, we did the shoes, the Lane Kiffin shoes for $650 each that sold out. So this is kind of a take off that, except this is a little more high end. It's a little tougher to sell because it's a higher price point. But, I felt like I got some momentum with it. I'm going to hit it really, really hard today while I got it. Because, like I said, I think I can get to 20 fairly soon. And I think the toughest part is going to be getting from 20 to 40. But, we've got a lot of stuff coming with it. All right, one other thing before we move on. Brickwatchcompany.com. We got a little bit of a weird thing. The watches say $23.99 on there. But when you put them into your checkout at the bag, it goes to $19.19, which is the real price. So I'm sorry for the confusion, but everybody that gets on there is texting me like, hey, why do these things say they're $2,400? They're not. It's a screw up on the website. I'm not a computer guy. I don't run that. The actual price is $1,919. Anybody that buys them, tweet your screenshots. I'll retweet it. You're getting a personal thank you. Whatever I got to do. Like I said, I'm taking it to the streets.
All right. Well, let's change the subject to this season's Ole Miss team. They're 5-1 at the turn. And 5-1, if you'd have told any Ole Miss fan in August that they were going to be 5-1 after playing Alabama and LSU at the beginning of the season, they would take it. What do you think so far?
I'm thrilled. Look, you said it when you looked at the schedule before the year. The path was let's split Bama and LSU. I mean, that's just realistic. Going to Bama, no matter what, even if they're allegedly down, which it doesn't look like they are anymore, is always going to be really tough. If you split Bama and LSU, and then you at Tulane looked tricky before the year too, and it was tricky for a half. 5-1's great. And when you look at the halfway mark, now that you can sit back and analyze it, the Pete Golding hire has been awesome. The Pete Golding hire, I know LSU had 600 yards, but I think LSU's got the best offense in America. I think they have their second best offense in school history behind 2019. That's how good they are on offense. And you look at every other game other than LSU, you hold Arkansas, for example, they have 400 yards rushing in the game last year in Fayetteville, and you hold them to 32. I never thought I'd see a day in this world where Ole Miss would hold Arkansas to 32 yards rushing in a football game, especially when they have a mobile quarterback like KJ Jefferson. That I've watched Ole Miss football for a long, long time. That is not something that ever happens for the run defense to play like that. And Golding's doing a great job with the recruiting. I thought the halftime adjustments at Tulane, for example, when Ole Miss was down 17-10, come out, start blitzing, held them to 3 points. I think the defense has improved a ton. On offense, got to be thrilled with Jackson Dart. He's tough, man. I'm impressed with his toughness. He's able to run. His mobility has been huge. The passing game is still, I don't want to say hit or miss because that's down on it, but, it's become very apparent that when Trey Harris is in there, it's all way, way different. But he's been banged up a couple times. He got banged up in the Arkansas game, and now we're dealing with the news that Jordan Watkins, who's been super solid, broke his hand in practice yesterday. So really hate to hear that, but got to have Trey Harris back in there. And the running game started slow. Especially Tulane only averaging 2.6 a carry. At Bama, it was bad, but against LSU, it looked good. I think it's coming on. I think the offensive line's improving. And Ulysses Bentley's really giving Ole Miss a spark behind Judkins. So I think overall, if you gave it a big grade at the halfway point, I mean, it's A- or A, I think. I mean, just 5-1. You got it all in front of you. Defense has improved a ton. I mean, I think it's super positive for the Rebels.
You mentioned Bentley. You mentioned everything's going on. Which players has just surprised you going into this season?
Okay, well, so, there was so much talk about Zachary Franklin coming over from UTSA. And I know he was hurt and he started with Bama, but he had 1,400 yards last year. And I thought he was going to be our number one, but he's been banged up and he hadn't really emerged. Trey Harris was Louisiana Tech's best player last year. He's been awesome. I mean, like the 4 touchdowns, even if it's against Mercer, that broke the Ole Miss record. He had the one against Tulane. I know he's been banged up some, but when he's been healthy, he's been elite. He's been dynamic. I think Jackson Dart's definitely taken a step forward. You mentioned Bentley. I like the way Bentley just cuts and gets up the field. I mean, he doesn't mess around. He doesn't go side to side. He puts his foot in the ground, and he gets in the hole, and he gets what he can. And I like how decisive he is with the football. I think he's someone I'd certainly like to mention. But, C-Strunk, played a great game last week. C-Strunk played it awesome against Arkansas. I won SEC Defensive Player of the Week. I just think the Ole Miss defensive line as a whole, too. I mean, that, like I said, I can't get over holding Arkansas to 32 yards rushing. That blows my mind.
Yeah, it's weird seeing an Arkansas team coached by Sam Pittman with an offensive line that is that poor.
Yeah, well, the Arkansas thing is interesting. It reminds me a lot of the Coach O LSU thing. So when you have a coach like Pittman, who's an O-line coach, like O is a D-line coach, you're totally dependent on how good your coordinators are because he's not really a specialist on either side of the ball. Well, when he has Kendall Briles and Barry Odom back there, they're going to be pretty damn good. But he lost both those guys. He downgraded Dan Enos, and I'm not even sure who their defensive coordinator is. But, you're totally dependent on your coordinators. And, you look at the OLSU era, and they had Joe Brady and Dave Aranda. They crushed. But when he lost those guys, he couldn't sustain it. And that's the beauty of having a guy like Lane Kiffin where it doesn't even matter. Whoever Ole Miss's offensive coordinator is, the offense is going to be fine. Like Saban's like that at defense for Bama. You need your head coach to specialize on one side of the ball to where you really only have to hit on the coordinator hire on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you mentioned earlier about Jordan Watkins. And like I said, we've all heard the rumors and everything. We know something happened. We don't know how severe it is, all of that stuff. And Lane's never going to talk about injury, so we'll find out against Auburn. But if it is true and Jordan Watkins is out, this means the recruitment of Zachary Franklin and him slowly coming along, he's probably going to slot to that outside position. They're going to move Dayton Wade inside to the slot. And then you have the Trey Harris situation. They should be okay.
Yeah, no, you would think so. I mean, Trey Harris is dealing with a lower leg injury too. I don't know how severe that is either from the Arkansas game, and he's already been banged up some. But yeah, in theory, I think Dayton Wade's shown enough. I think he actually profiles well as a slot receiver too. So I think in theory, what you're saying makes sense, but we don't know how bad Trey Harris is hurt. And like I said, I was so excited. I mean, Franklin was the number 5 transfer total in the portal. I mean, that's how good he was at UT San Antonio. He had off-season surgery. He hadn't really he's been dealing with some stuff. But I think there's still a great chance for him to bounce back here in the second half of the year. And, you look at that Arkansas game too. Look, that thing's never pretty. That was a spot where I said all week, Ole Miss was favored by anywhere between 11 and 13. There wasn't a chance in hell I was laying that many points with Ole Miss in that game. You're coming off an emotional high, huge win against LSU. You had Bama, which you put so much into the week before. That was a survive and advance situation last week against Arkansas. It doesn't matter if they only won by 7 and it was close. No one cares. You got the win. You're going to the bye. Time to get healthy and get ready for – I'm telling you, this at Auburn game, everybody knows it. It's going to be murder. Freeze, Auburn's whole season is going to be if Freeze beats Ole Miss his first year. And where Auburn is right now, I'm actually going to Auburn LSU in Baton Rouge this weekend. The Barstool College football shows at Fred's there on Saturday. Auburn is one of those teams this year. Their quarterback play stinks. They can't throw the ball. I mean, they may be going to a freshman now. Peyton Thorne from Michigan State hadn't worked out. Robbie Ashford can't really throw. So they're kind of in one of those situations where they're going to struggle to win on the road because they can't score enough. But when they're at home, behind that crowd and that energy, night game, they're going to be tough at home. And they almost knocked off Georgia at home. They should have. I mean, that game for Ole Miss is going to be a brutally tough game. No matter – Auburn could lose by 4 touchdowns at LSU, and that's not going to change how I view Ole Miss Auburn next week. It's going to be that tough.
Yeah, the weird thing is my boss on Locked On actually does Locked On Auburn as his side thing. And he's talked about what they're doing for that game. He's actually going to that football game. He doesn't usually attend the games. He says that place is going to be an absolute cauldron, and it is set up to be that way to where picture Tennessee 2021, that is what Ole Miss is walking into.
Yeah, no, it's going to be tough. And I know the bye week is coming a good – so one break, Auburn's off a bye this week against LSU. The bye week came at a good time with Jackson Dart getting a little banged up early in that Arkansas game. The Trey Harris thing, you just mentioned Ole Miss is a little beat up. So that's an advantage. But, look, I mean, everybody from Ole Miss knows how this Freeze Auburn thing. I mean, no one thinks it's going to be easy, especially on the road at night. I've attended I haven't been to every SEC stadium, but I've been to all of them. I've never been to Missouri. I've never been to Kentucky. And I think that's it. And I've said it before. I think Auburn's the most underrated in the entire SEC, period. It gets freaking rocking in there. And they're going to be so jacked up because the Freeze thing and all that. I know there's some, I've heard there's bad blood with Freeze and Lane behind the scenes, especially with everything that happened with them getting hired last year and Lane not going to that whole soap opera. So, yeah, I mean, it's just going to be a bloody murder game. And if you're an Ole Miss fan, you just got to try to get out. I don't care if you win by 1. You just got to get out of there with the win. Because if you do get out of Auburn with the win, you feel good about Vandy at home, sets up A&M at home where you feel fairly good. And, when you look at this Ole Miss year under Lane, Ole Miss wins their home games. I mean, I know they dropped a couple last year, but Lane's 18-2 at home since 2020. But winning on the road is a whole different beast in the Southeastern Conference. And, he's really gotten where he consistently wins the home games, but on the road, still more to be determined.
Okay, we can move on to the second half predictions and everything. And I had a video that came out Thursday, and it was just, can Ole Miss go 11-1? Not will they, not should they, can they?
I mean, they can, but I mean, can is a different.
It's not should or will. Yeah.
I think 10 wins is the total top end goal here. You can just at Georgia, you can't before the season, you just look at Georgia and at Bama and you say anything other than a loss is like, I don't want to say a miracle, but you at 5-1 at the break right now, 10-2 to me is the goal. I just don't think you can, say any more about, Georgia is the back-to-back national champions and at home. I just don't think you can really go in saying like, hey, I think Ole Miss is going to win this game. But all the other 5 are winnable. The at Auburn, to me, is the most tricky because the freeze thing. Look, Mississippi State stinks this year. Everybody knows it. But if the weather is like super bad, which it is a lot in that Egg Bowl, and they'll be fired up at home, that's still sticky. Like, that's never going to be easy. It's a road game, no matter how bad they are. And then at A&M at home isn't easy either. But I feel good about it and that it's at home. A&M's been struggling on the road the last couple of years. Like, if I was at A&M, I'd feel worse about it. So, I think there's a path to 10 wins. But, man, I'm telling you, this Auburn game is really the key to it all because this Auburn game is so sketchy.
Yeah, it's going to be a thing. And this is honestly, if you look at bullets that Hugh Freeze puts in his gun this year, the Ole Miss game was going to be one of their two because he wasn't planning on beating Alabama. He wasn't planning on beating Georgia, but he thinks he could get Lane, and he thinks he can get Ole Miss.
Yeah, and look, the Freeze thing, I mean, he's going to get it going at Auburn. He's just got to find next year. He'll have a quarterback in there next year. And it's funny doing the what-if moments in life, but Spencer Sanders, getting paid God knows what to hold a clipboard for Ole Miss this year, Auburn said, you come here, you start. And he ended up choosing Ole Miss over Auburn, and he doesn't even play. And just, think about how different it would be for Auburn. So shout out to the Grove Collective and everyone for keeping Spencer Sanders from Hugh Freeze because they would be a hell of a lot better football team if they had him. I can tell you that.
Yeah, they have pretty good defense. Oh, by the way, before we get out of here, Ron Roberts is the defensive coordinator for Auburn.
Okay.
He was the defensive coordinator for Baylor in the Sugar Bowl. Lane Kiffin traditionally does not have clunkers against the defensive coordinators back-to-back games. Do you think Lane's going to be okay against that defensive scheme?
Yeah, and that Sugar Bowl, look, I mean, everything changed when Matt Corral went down. Like that was one of those things where he was going out there playing for his team, even if it hurt his draft stock. And when he went down, you had to put Altmaier, who I love, I like Luke as a dude, but he was a true freshman. He wasn't prepared to go in and play that game. So it's even if it was a clunker, like that wasn't – I mean, that was just – that's kind of a high variance situation that's hard to analyze. I think Ole Miss Auburn, though, you're looking at like a 23-20 type game is what I think. I think it's going to be – I don't think it's going to be any kind of a shootout. I think Auburn's defense and crowd is going to keep them in that game. It's not going to be easy to score a ton of points, but I don't think Auburn's that explosive on offense either. So, I think, like I said, Ole Miss 23-20 would be my early projection.
Yeah. Low-key storyline from that game. Quinshon Judkins goes back to Auburn. He's like right down the road from when he went to high school. Auburn has Jarquez Hunter, who was a heavy lean towards Ole Miss during his recruitment as well. So that's an interesting storyline.
I think you're right about the Judkins thing. He, obviously had a slower start to the year. He had the rib injury, a few things. Had the awesome game against LSU. I think the Auburn game is a spot where you can look for him to really, off the bye, being healthier, really hopefully get it going. But I think the bigger story than even him is just how Ole Miss offensive line plays going forward, because obviously that was a huge struggle. If you graded the whole team on the first half, the Tulane and Bama games especially, the O-line would have been the weakest link, but they played awesome against LSU. I thought they played pretty good against Arkansas, so I think it's improving. And I think the offensive line play is really going to be the key at Auburn and at Georgia.
All right. Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hey, Ben, thank you so much for stopping by. I look forward to talking to you again, man.
Sounds good. And Ole Miss fans, DM me at Stool Mintzy, Twitter and Instagram if you're interested in the watches. Like I said, if I know you or not, I'll give you a phone call, introduce myself. I appreciate the support. We got to get Dave Portnoy and Barstool to the Grove next year.
All right.